Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you have part 5 of my SCASL project. At the time of filming this portion, I have not decided whether or not I'm going to go ahead and do my wrap-up thoughts. I think I am. I was thinking about splitting it into 2 videos and making a part 6 wrap-up, but I don't think I will. So I have 4 books here physically, 3 books that I read via ebook because I couldn't get physical copies of, so that's 7 books to talk about. That's all I had left to read on this list because I had already read 9 of them, chose not to read another one, talked about 3 of them in part 4. So we're gonna start off this section with the one that I have the most conflicted thoughts about. And that is The Life and Crimes of Hoodie Rosen by Isaac Bloom. The reason that I have conflicted thoughts about this book, the main character, Hoodie Rosen, he belongs to a community of very conservative Orthodox Jews. And they have recently moved to a new area and they're trying to build an apartment complex for a lot of people in their community, and they're getting some backlash against this idea, some people who are being anti-Semitic. They've got some interesting ideas about it. One of the inciting incidents in this is Hoodie is, I guess, out exploring or something. I don't remember that part, but he discovers the cemetery, and on some tombstones of clearly Jewish people, there were some swastikas drawn. And this other girl, who happens to be the daughter of the mayor, happens to be there as well. And they both discover this and they're like, oh no, we have to take care of this. We have to erase this desecration. The way that Hoodie's community responds to him just interacting at this point, he eventually befriends this girl, but just interacting with this girl who is not Jewish, who's not Orthodox, it seems odd, it seems disproportionate, but at the same time it resonated with part of my religious trauma in my upbringing. No, I'm not Orthodox Jewish, but I grew up in a very conservative, fundamentalist Christian environment, and there's a lot of things that, looking back on, while I'm most definitely still a Christian, those things and the way that they responded, it's so hurtful, so harmful, so letter of the law, but not getting at the intent of what it's supposed to be, and so harmful. So I looked at the way that they responded and I'm like, unfortunately, this is true. This is how a lot of people respond. It's a way to get a glimpse at that. But at the same time, when you consider the environment where we are now, you know, with the genocide in Gaza, with the way that many hardline conservative members of the Knesset, the Jewish legislative body, are reacting and speaking about Palestinians, it's really difficult to have any sort of sympathy to anyone in here. And there's an incident where some of the boys that he's friends with are attacked in an anti-Semitic attack, and he's not there because he's hanging out with this girl, and that gets him sort of ostracized from his community. But in some of their descriptions, and I told my mom, described this to my mom as well, and some of their descriptions of what the people were doing, I don't know of any kid, you know, high school, middle school, etc., who would say those sorts of things to be mean, because I don't think it would occur to them. Let me tell you what this is. So in this attack, one of the things that happened was all of the head coverings that a particular boy had were taken off, and the Gentile, the quote unquote regular person, was doing it, and they were saying, we want to see your Jew horns. And as someone who has studied a lot of this stuff, has grown up in an environment that's very, not Jewish, but delves deep into that lore, teachings, etc., I have never heard that. And it's not really, I mean, maybe that was one of the things where I was like, wait a sec, I thought this was a contemporary novel. Is it from decades ago? But no, it's set contemporary because this girl has TikTok. But I just was like, if they did that, that's clearly wrong. That's something awful. They're dehumanizing the other person. I just don't know that that's what they would say. It just struck me as really odd and out of place. And because of that, it pulled me even more out of the story, stretched that suspension of disbelief. So this is very difficult. The structure of the book, a lot of the things that they dealt with were very real, very harmful, and they need to be dealt with. They need to be learned about, understood. You need to know other people's stories to basically know how they would act so that you can act better. But at the same time, it just didn't feel real and it felt uncomfortable the whole way through. I don't know about this book. I'm fairly certain that this was selected to be on the list before most of the events, or maybe just after October 7th. It's hard to square with what I saw of the overall trend of books being put on the list. So that's a tricky one. Now the other ones I don't have conflicting thoughts about. They aren't going to take super long to talk about. So let's get into, I'll alternate with physical book and one that I read via ebook. So the next one that I read via ebook is Spells for Lost Things by Jenna Evans Welch. I was eventually able to find an ebook copy on Everand. That was the only place where I could find a copy, basically. I mean, I could have purchased it, but I didn't want to go out and purchase it. I have appreciated 2 out of the other 3 Jenna Evans Welch books that I've read that are part of the Love and series. Very much romance-based with some familial exploration. In Spells for Lost Things, you've got 2 main characters, and it's been a while since I've read them, and I've read so many books in June. I don't remember their names. But the female main character is the daughter of a single mom who's very successful at, I think, in realty. Her sister dies, and so they end up going back to that side of the country, from California to Salem, Massachusetts. And you discover that, there's witches involved in her side of the family. But she's also having to deal with interacting with her mom, learning about this whole side of her mom that she didn't know anything about, that her mom never told her anything about. And then you've also got the male main character who's dealing with the fact that he has been in the foster care system for years. His mom struggles mightily with addiction. And he's almost, I think he's 16, almost 17. He really wants to get back with this. But at the start of this book, he has a new placement that his social worker really thinks is going to work out. And it turns out to be one of his mom's very good childhood friends. And they're doing their best to welcome him as part of the family. They've got 4 kids of their own. And he's really, really struggling with it because he wants to get back, be with his mom. He knows that his mom struggles, but he's like, why didn't you reach out years before and bring me into your family if you're doing this as a favor to my mom? Because, there's been multiple years, multiple families. These 2 families these 2 characters, I should say, end up crossing together and interweaving. And yes, there is a little bit of a romance, but that is not the focus of the story. The focus is on these kids' search for that lost thing, that lost bit of family. And Jenna Evans Welch does a really good job with it. And I appreciate romance type books when they are done like that. And I think that Jenna Evans Welch did a phenomenal job with this book. I really appreciated it. I think it was a 4 stars, very high 4 stars, almost a 4.5, but not quite. So that one definitely was a success. Now, building on the romance part of it, we have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I knew going into this, I set my expectations right. Stereotypical romance book. I thought this was an adult book because Lynn Painter also writes adult romances. It's not. It's clearly YA. The main character is in high school. I think she's a senior. It's got the Groundhog Day trope, which I think I've read other books that have the Groundhog Day trope, but obviously you've got The Do-Over. I don't like it. I don't like the Groundhog Day trope. In this case, she is reliving Valentine's Day every day. The first time she lives through it, she wants to make this perfect Valentine's Day for her and her boyfriend. She's gonna finally say, I love you. And like everything that can go wrong goes wrong. And then she wakes up the next day and it's Valentine's Day again. And she ends up, obviously, with the guy who's here, who is not her boyfriend at the beginning of the novel. And so she, the main character, lives through all of these days. Yes, I can get that she's going to have character development throughout these days, and that she's had multiple days to live and fall in love with this other main character. But the thing about a Groundhog Day trope and setup is that he does not live through all of these days. He has not had that time to grow and mature. It's basically insta-love for him, unless you backpedal and say, oh, he's been in love with her all along, which is kind of what Lynn Painter does. So it's completely dissatisfying. Would this be an enjoyable read for a lot of people? Yes. Was it for me? No, and I knew that going into it, so 3.5 stars. It's fine. All right, so the next book that I have to talk about is Wrecked by Heather Henson. This was much shorter than I expected, and it was what I call the token opioid crisis book. On every list that I've read for the Young Adult SCASL Book Award, there's been at least one of these, and the one from last year actually was the one that the kids chose. So I can see why they're going to try to put this on the list. It was a lot shorter than I expected, and I did appreciate that unlike all of the other opioid crisis books, they didn't deal with that by having an immediate family member being addicted, or the people, the kids, the characters themselves being addicted. So it had a different approach to it. That's about all the positive things that I can say about this. It was supposed to be a little bit thrillery. It was a little bit. But then you get to the end and there was reveal after reveal after reveal after reveal. So you think you learned something in the first reveal. But then there's reveal number 2 where it goes, oh no, just kidding. This first reveal is actually something completely different. And then there's a third reveal where it's like, oh no, just kidding. This second reveal wasn't what you thought it was. And it's also not what you thought the first reveal was. And that happens all within like 10, 20 pages at the end of the book. So I got to the end going, what just happened here? I still don't understand it. So it was a 3 stars. I think maybe it got a 3.5 stars. I can see how it might be enjoyable, but I just got to the end and I'm just like, why? Why are we contorting ourselves into knots at the end of this book that's so short? It's like 250 pages. I don't know. It was fine. Speaking of a short book, we have Star Child by E.B. Zaboy. It's called A Biographical Constellation of Octavia Estelle Butler. This is not a straightforward biography by any means. And if you wanted to learn a lot about Octavia E. Butler, this is not the book for that. E.B. Zaboy definitely has a lot of appreciation for Octavia Butler, what she went through, the way that she changed the landscape of science fiction, especially for Black female writers. You really wouldn't have authors like E.B. Zaboy or Justina Ireland if not for the pioneer of Octavia E. Butler. And you can clearly see that in how E.B. Zaboy wrote this. It's a quick read. You have some that's narrative nonfiction, but then you also have a lot of poetry throughout, and it alternates. And so you learn a little bit in some of the poetry that then gets explained in some of the narrative nonfiction portions, but this is not be all, end all, tell all of Octavia E. Butler. This is a great introduction. If a struggling reader had to choose an author or a biography or something, this would definitely be something to give them that they could handle. I definitely appreciated this. I don't rate a lot of autobiography, memoir type things, and this was just, the way this was written, it was also very tricky, so I chose not to read it. The last of the ebook reads that I have is Dead Flip, and that was actually the last one that I read. That was the one of 2 horror books that were on the SCASL list. The other one I chose not to read. This is definitely categorized as horror and it's supposed to be horrific, but I'm like, this is not even scary in the least. And I also thought, this is definitely not YA either. This feels and reads very much like middle grade. So the conceit of the book is it's supposed to evoke those Stranger Things vibes, It's supposed to evoke the late 80s, early 90s nostalgia for mainly people my age, like growing up in that time period, and also fans of Stranger Things, which a lot of the younger generation people now, not necessarily middle school, more high school, because it's not that Stranger Things is not at the peak of its popularity anymore. It's on the decline because it's not being produced anymore. It's supposed to have that sort of idea. It doesn't ever really get there. You have two basic timelines. In one timeline, late 80s, you have three best friends who are, I think, 7th grade. I might be wrong. It might be 8th grade and it might be 6th grade. They're definitely middle school. But you have three really good friends. 2 guys, 1 girl. At the end of that summer, something is going to happen to a couple of them. A couple of them are going to move. One of them really far away. They're grappling with what will this mean for our friendship. But they're also going to this comic book store and he's got this arcade and there's this cool new game. And obviously something is going to happen with that really weird game. So that's one of the timelines. In the other timeline, which is in the early 90s, 93 to 95, you have 2 of those 3 characters. One of them has gone missing, presumed dead. They are now, I believe, seniors in high school. They live completely separate lives. They never really talk to each other. They're both haunted in their own ways for what happened to their friend in that fateful summer. And the timelines gradually merge. It was so basic. And also I couldn't figure out what was supposed to be scary about what was happening or had happened to that friend that went missing. And also how it was going to be resolved. There never really were any major consequences either to some of the scary things that were happening in the 90s portion. And I'm like, I don't like horror, but like suspense, there was none of it there. So I'm like, this was so blasé. This was not a horror book. This was not something that I wasn't gonna like because it was too horrific. It just was boring. And I cannot see any high schooler looking at that going, ooh, I want to read that. That's horror, that's stuff I'll like. It felt really babyish. So I don't think it really fit on the young adult list. And the last book that I'll talk about is Overground Railroad, The Green Book and the Roots of Black Travel in America. I did find out that there is a young reader's version of this, and that is the version that was put on the list, but there was nothing on the list to specify that it was the young reader's version. And I also think that my public library doesn't have the young reader's version. And I don't know necessarily that this needed a young reader's version. I still really, really appreciated and enjoyed this book. The way that Candace E. Taylor writes, very engaging, very gripping. The way that she tells the story, it's easy to listen to. And I didn't listen to it, I read it physically. But it's easy to get involved in it and understand the things that are happening. And also the way that it is laid out, I thought was well done. So for example, you have regular text here, but you also have the pictures inserted. So it's not like some history books that are geared towards adults. Well, they'll have solid text, footnotes, and then like a section of pictures. This is all, it's woven in. So yes, you've got some pages that are solid text, but you've also got stuff like this where you have a page of advertisement or front cover of the Green Book, and you've also got text itself. And it's a really, really good balance. And she's got photographs of former locations that she took herself as she traveled through this. And then there's a whole section towards the end that goes through a lot of these places, which I thought was a fantastic touch. And it's laid out really well, and she talks about a lot of really important things. So I highly recommend this one. I'm really glad that this was the nonfiction book that they included on the list. Now technically the Star Child is nonfiction, sort of, but it's also got that poetical element to it, but this is definitely well done. So I was going to film my wrap-up portion separately because I was gonna stop and think about what I wanted to say, which probably still would have been a good idea, but I've already got a rough idea. I'm not gonna pull any of the books out. I don't have a lot. I mean, I do have just under half of the young adult books, but they're all on the shelf over here. And as far as the middle grade books go, the ones that I have, I've already packed up in crates that I've put out there that I'm going to take to my classroom library. And the ones that I don't have, they're at the library or they're next to impossible for me to get. So I'm not going to pull all of those. I've already talked about the statistics and things in the first video. But my one overarching thought about both lists this year is that they are both the best cumulative lists that I have read in any of the years that I've been doing this. I started reading the middle grade list in 2018. I started reading the young adult list in 2019. So I've read all of the books on the list, except for the ones I couldn't get a hold of, for 6-7 years. And this is the best year. I mean, you look ratings wise, I didn't have anything less than a 3 stars this year. A couple of those 3 stars were in the young adult list. As far as the middle grade list goes, my lowest rating was a 3.5 star, which is still really good. Not one that I'll keep personally, but still one that I might put on a classroom shelf. So just ratings wise, for me personally, best list. Representation, once I actually got into these books, I already knew going into this list that they were picked very specifically for the representation that they had in them. The representation was already phenomenal just on the surface level that I could see before reading the books. Now, after reading the books, so much solid, excellent, needed representation. There was examples of neurodivergence, examples of physical handicaps, LGBTQ, racial representation, so much in almost every single one of these books. And I thought that was so well done. And there was more historical than I realized in the contemporary, because there were a couple that were 80s, 90s that I didn't necessarily realize were historical when I made the evaluation in the first place. And so even genre-wise, there was a really good mix. Now, there really wasn't any sci-fi. That's fine. It's really hard to get sci-fi, and recently there hasn't been a lot of good sci-fi overall. But my overall thoughts are that the group that makes these recommendations, that puts together these lists, the SCASL, they did a phenomenal job in picking books this year. When I say that it's the best year overall, there is literally no doubt that it's the best year overall. I've never purchased as many of the books from the list to put in my classroom library as I have this year. Almost every single one of the middle grade books I'll be purchasing and putting on the library and in my classroom library. I guess when you have someone coming at you going, you're worthless, and you're trying to do XYZ, you go, oh, that's what you think? Take this. So yeah, I'm a huge proponent of the SCASL. I really, really hope that the new regulations that went into effect through a legislative loophole in my state get taken down. Because as of June 28th, in my state, if a book is challenged in one particular school district, it does not matter which school district it is in the state, there is and whatever body it is, and I think it's connected to the State Department, I don't remember exactly, but if it is ruled that no, you cannot have that book has to come out of every single library, school library in the entire state. So yeah, that's gonna be fun. It's kind of a downer note to end this on, but I wanted to bring that up and mention that, and also continue to shout out this organization. I don't know how far the reach of these videos are. They're some of the consistently really, really low performing videos on my channel. Not that I get that many views, but this group does very needed work. They're not appreciated at all. They're facing all kinds of challenges and struggles, and they need to be supported because they know what they are doing when they are choosing these books. They've chosen amazing books for these kids to then go in and read and choose their favorites and put them, as award winners. So there you go. That wraps up my SCASL project for 2024, one of my most successful ones because I finished it in 2 months. Not too shabby. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.